You know, in a typical, whoa, hello. You know, in a typical greeting with someone, you kind of have this list of things about yourself that you go through. They'll say, hello, what is your name? My name is Steve Powers. I'm married. My wife is Susan. And usually, at the end of that, as a kind of a summary of my family, I'll say, and I have 3 teenage sons. Well, as of today, I can't say that anymore. Nathan's birthday is today. He is 20. And I told him I wouldn't make a big deal about it, but I did want him to hear me tell you how much I love him and to let him know that I'm proud of him. Now that that's over, let's go to our lesson for today, actually. It's very important to me. We're going to study from Matthew chapter 16 today. In our Bible reading we're doing, we did 5 chapters or so this week. But I think that chapter 16 is a very pivotal chapter in the book of Matthew. There's a shift kind of in before chapter 16. Jesus is a teacher. He's a rabbi. He has followers who are his disciples that he's teaching, that he's training. But when we get to Matthew chapter 16, the reason it's pivotal is from this point forward, Jesus is very clear to them, to his disciples, why he's on the earth. He claims and reveals to his disciples in chapter 16 that he is indeed not just a good man, not just a teacher, not just a rabbi, but he actually is the Messiah who was prophesied to come. And from this point forward, he begins to explain to them about the cross that he's going to march to or to bear. So let's read from Matthew chapter 16, beginning in verse 13, and we'll read through 23. Matthew 16, beginning in verse 13. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he began asking his disciples, saying, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, and others Elijah, but still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Simon Peter answered and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered and said, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not overpower it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." And he warned his disciples that they should tell no one that he was the Christ. And from that time, Jesus Christ began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem, suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and be raised on the 3rd day. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "God forbid it, Lord. This shall never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but man's." Now I think it's very important. If you look here in verse 15, Jesus personalizes the question. He begins by saying, "What does popular opinion say about me? Who do people say I am? What's the general thinking?" And there is some confusion. Elijah, one of the prophets. But then Jesus personalizes the question. And when he personalizes it, it compels his disciples to answer this question, not in terms of what everyone else thinks, but in terms of their own personal conviction. It's a personal question. The first question, who do people say I am? Oh, well, you might be this, you might be this. This is what people are saying. This is our opinion poll. But then Jesus asked this brilliant question. It's very personal. Okay, now what do you think? Who do you say that I am? You can tell whether a man is clever by his answers. You can tell whether a man is wise by his questions. Questions are powerful. This woman from Forbes magazine writes, in my executive coaching practice, asking the right questions is the single most important tool I use to help others grow themselves. And so as Jesus asked this question, who do you say that I am? The answer is going to change everything about them. If they go along with popular opinion, well, you're a good teacher, you're a rabbi, you're a prophet, then their lives will maybe go one direction. But if they answer and say, you are the Christ, that really changes everything about the rest of their lives. It's true for our answer to this question. If we just say that Jesus was an important historical personality, a man from history who was a good man, we are not obliged to obey him or follow him. But if we say, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, then we realize and know that we are compelled to obey him, to follow him, because it is in his name and his name only that salvation comes. It changes everything. Let's consider then, as we outline this section with first, number one, that Jesus Christ declaration is confirmed. He confirms that he is the Christ. Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not overpower it. The place where this setting, this event unfolds, is an area known for its pagan idolatrous worship. And it's here that Jesus reveals to his apostles that he is the one to be worshiped, that he is the Messiah. If you look at this map, I have drawn a little parenthesis here. It's about 25 miles from the Sea of Galilee up to Caesarea Philippi. The region here is quite beautiful. It's different than the rest of the country. I guess it is possible over the past 2,000 years, and even before that, 1,000 years or so, at the conquest of Canaan by the Israelites, that the area would have been a little more lush and green. But certainly when Susan and I had the opportunity to visit many years ago, you could tell a huge difference from the lower part of Israel and this upper region. No wonder it's been the source of great contention between Syria and Israel for many, many years. It's beautiful. The Golan Heights region up to where you see Caesarea Philippi, about 25 miles. Here's just some descriptive information. Situated 25 miles north of the Sea of Galilee at the base of Mount Hermon, Caesarea Philippi is the location of one of the largest springs feeding the Jordan River. This abundant water supply has made the area very fertile and attractive for religious worship. Numerous temples were built at this city in the Hellenistic or Greek and Roman periods. I'm going to show you some pictures. These are some pictures that I actually took myself. I tried to choose some that I've never shown you before. I have plenty that I haven't ever shown you. But just to see this might be something that would be very typical here in north central Arkansas during the spring, to see beautiful streams and rivers like this. But it's quite unusual in the more arid desert-type climate that's there in Israel. So you can see why this is such a beautiful place. The day we visited there, and I've told you this before, there were buses of school children there. This was their field trip. Let's go see the water. And there were a lot of children there just walking around, feeling the water, and just enjoying how lush and beautiful this area is. Let's go to the next slide. I took this picture also. There is a placard there, or a sign that has an artist depiction of what this area would have looked like, this pagan worship center to the god Pan. I've drawn the arrow there because I want to show you the picture that I took that shows what it looks like today. If you'll, wait a minute, go back. I'm sorry, I jumped you. If you can see right at the bottom of the arrow, there's kind of a little impression, and then above it, another smaller little impression, right there where the arrow is. I'll show you now the same place, the picture that I took. Now let's go. Okay, so there it is, the arrow pointing to the same impressions. There's a large cave there with water coming out of the cave. And then one more picture. There we are standing in that impression, okay? Man, that's a much younger version of me now, it seems like. And then this is above it, some of the artwork that's there. Do I have another one? Yeah. Okay, this is a little description, and I know you can't read that, so I wrote it down. The conquest of Alexander the Great in the 3rd century BC brought the Greeks to the east. The Greeks were taken by the natural beauty of this site, touched particularly by the cave in which springs welled. It is no wonder that they sanctified this cave, dedicating it to Pan, the god of the forest and shepherds. So Jesus chose this pagan area, beautiful, maybe a kind of a retreat area for them, for Jesus to reveal himself. An area well known for its pagan idolatrous worship, to reveal to his disciples that he was the Messiah. B.W. Johnson and Don DeWelt in the Gospel of Mark wrote that he had never openly spoken of his messiahship. The time was come when it was the greatest moment that they should have settled conception of his real character and mission. So Jesus here reveals that this is truly who he is, so there would be no question. We must not discount the magnitude of this confession. It's easy for us because we know the whole story and we know who Jesus is. It's difficult for us to understand how historically and personally and eternally this revelation would have been in change to these disciples. They were going to die for him. They were going to be persecuted for him. They were going to carry the message of salvation to the world. And this revelation to them, this confession that Jesus really is the Messiah. He's the one who was to come to bring salvation to the world, prophesied through generations of Israelite history. He is truly the Messiah. We cannot underestimate or underplay the importance of this confession. Now, how do we answer the question? When a person responds to the invitation, or when a person desires to become a Christian, they make this statement: I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God. It's the statement that answers the question, who do you say Jesus is? Same question that Jesus asked his disciples. Not answered by opinion polls or what everyone else thinks. When a person becomes a Christian, it's a personal question. Who do you say he is? Fight the good fight of faith. Lay hold of eternal life, to which you also were called, and have confessed the good confession in the presence of many witnesses. As they went along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, "Look, water, what prevents me from being baptized?" And Philip said, "If you believe with all of your heart, you may." And he answered and said, "I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God." What is his answer to the question, who do you say Jesus is? His answer is the good confession. It is, I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And the answer to the question makes all the difference in the world. You could ask a man on the street interview, ask people, who do you say Jesus is? Many might say, he's a good man. He's a good teacher. He's an important historical person. But the person who answers from the heart, meaning, I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God, gives an answer that changes his life. For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in his glory of his Father with the holy angels. It's a privilege to make the statement that we believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God. In the next section, we were going to look at it from this outline. Jesus begins to explain the cross. I'm the Messiah. You've confessed it, Peter. Now let me explain to you how it's going to unfold. Here's what's going to happen. Let's go to the next slide. Jesus is so clear. It's hard for me sometimes to imagine why the disciples couldn't grasp it. Maybe their perception of what being the Messiah meant as a conquering king made a difference. But Jesus is so clear here. It is difficult sometimes for me to put myself in their shoes and say they couldn't grasp it. Look how specific this is. Jesus began to show his disciples he must go to Jerusalem, tells where it's going to happen, suffer. Who's going to do it? That he's going to be killed, and he's going to be raised on the third day. But yet when it all unfolds, they're all surprised about it. Can't see it. Don't understand it. Let's not be too hard on them. We can be pretty dull sometimes, can't we? Things that should be so clear to us that aren't. But Jesus begins here to unveil the cross, to explain to them, here's what's going to happen. The reason I've come is not to conquer kingdoms, but to conquer sin, to conquer Satan. The reason I have come is to provide not a physical victory, but a spiritual one. Not a temporary one, but an eternal one. It's totally different than what you think. And so as the disciples wrestle with this, it's really a shift here in Matthew 16 because Jesus is implanting in them these eternal truths about the nature of why he's there. And then we have this. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord. This shall never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. For you are not setting your mind on the interests of God, but man's interests. Now, I've put in gold interests because I think that's really important. I think it's also pretty noteworthy to think that Peter, just moments before, had made this great revelation that came from God that Jesus was the Messiah. And so God used Peter as an instrument of good. And here, just seemingly moments later, Satan uses Peter as an instrument of evil and discouragement. Same person, almost the same setting, not much time in between, but it points to us how that Satan wants to destroy our confession that Jesus is the Christ. So to illustrate this, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not overpower it. So as we see here, God had revealed this to Peter. And then I've written the same one that the Father used as a vessel of confession of Jesus as the Christ was now being used by Satan as a vessel of discouragement. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. The impact of this confession and what it was going to do to the world was so important that it got Satan's attention. And he used Peter as a source of discouragement. So, what about us? For every great moment spiritually in our lives, we've got to be watchful for Satan to turn even a great moment like that into a source of discouragement. We've got to always be alert. We've always got to be knowing that Satan seeks to destroy us and to bring us down and to guard against him. The explanation of Christ's suffering would have come as a terrible, disappointing shock to the disciples, which may explain why Peter said what he did. He couldn't grasp this. And I think it's important, as I pointed out earlier in John chapter 20 and verse 9, at the empty tomb, even that far along, for as of yet, they did not understand the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. It took a long time for it to come to their minds, for them to believe it. In this next section, we'll look at, I'd like for you to consider how that cross-bearing is expected. We'll look at these three areas: the denial of self, the denial of the world, and a life focused on eternity. Let's read back in Matthew chapter 16, if you'll turn there with me now. Matthew chapter 16. Let's begin in verse 24 and read through 28. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." Now let's process this for a moment. Jesus reveals himself, the Messiah. It's going to mean suffering and a cross to bear. That Satan will work to complicate and to discourage and to keep from happening. The cross is why I am here. But you have a cross too. Take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life shall lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake shall find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and will then recompense every man according to his deeds. Truly I say to you, there are some of those standing here who shall not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Let's look at these three ideas then. How to live a life that confesses Christ and set our minds. How to bear our own cross. The first one is a denial of self from verse 24. And here's the verse again. Jesus said to his disciples, "If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." Easy to read, but hard to do. Denying myself and the things that I want, the goals of my life are now to be pleasing to him. Secondly, in verses 25 and 26, denial of the world. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? What really matters at the end of life? What really matters? Where you live? What you drive? What your bottom line is? What matters in the end? Therefore, if you have been raised up with Christ, Keep seeking the things above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on the things above, not on the things that are on the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, is revealed, then you also will be revealed with him in glory. And finally, a life focused on eternity. Jesus concludes his teaching here in this section with these words: "For the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels and will repay every man according to his deeds. Truly I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." It is important for us then, as those who are bearing our cross, to deny ourselves, deny the world, but to keep our focus on the eternal. It's hard to do because we get wrapped up in all the things that's going on in our lives. But we've got to clear our minds and to refocus them upon those things that are eternal, because they're the only things that really matter in eternity. The Son of Man is going to come in his glory with his angels and will repay every man according to his deeds. So living the self-sacrificed life, the cross-bearing life, the world-denying life is worth it when we keep our eyes focused upon eternity. And eternity can come upon us when we least expect it. Who do you say that I am? The answer changes everything. I suppose it's tempting when we think about our Christian walk to look for those minimums that God requires of us. What do I have to do to be pleasing to God? Wouldn't a better answer be, I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and I'll do everything for him. Denial of myself, denial of the world, and my life focused on the interests of God. You think about these things, apply them to yourself. Let's consider them as we encourage one another with this song. If you'd like to respond, please come now as we stand and sing to encourage you.